and psychosocial issues. Disasters and the destruction brought about by them create particular stressors for children. Children may experience death, injury, loss, or separation from loved ones. They experience disruption in their routine, and the structure of their entire life, gets upended. Stress affects children's physical health, quality of life, and how they do at home, in schools, or in their communities generally. Some children, they might even develop disorders like anxiety, depression, and post traumatic stress disorder after a disaster. Support systems comprising of parents, family, friends, relatives, teachers, they are essentially, they are very, very essential for coping with such traumatic events. But in the aftermath of a disaster, many children, they may lose that support system altogether. So it's very important to keep children mentally and physically safe both during and after a disaster. Mental stress from a disaster can be harder on children than it is on adults. Why is that? That is because they understand less about the situation. They usually feel no sense of control over the events happening around them, and they also have very little to no experience coping with such stressful situations, right? So hence psychosocial care and support for children, it has emerged as a very, very pressing issue, as an inalienable service in post disaster situations, especially for children. We have seen that during the COVID times, how children dealt with multiple issues of fear, anxiety, and PTSD in their daily lives. So we are gathered here with an objective to highlight this issue through this webinar. So, without any delay, may I start the event, and may I please invite Dr. Shaheen Ansari from CRI, who is an education specialist with CRI, to deliver the inaugural address and begin the program today. Welcome, sir, and over to you, Dr. Shaheen.
Thank you, Dolphy, for setting the context very well. You have explained the topic and how it is important to organize this webinar. But before that, I would like to thank NIDM, MGCPA, UNICEF for starting this weekly webinar, which is very important because uh, we all are working. Actually, if you say we are working for healthy, happy, and creative childhood, right? And the most challenging period to ensure child rights, child protection, their health, their well-being are during and after disaster. When disaster happens, most of us, focus on all the aspects of life, food, medicine, and other thing, but we hardly bother about the from children's perspective, like their sports time, their medicine, immunization, all those things, and their how they are coping with it. Because for children, they are just, they don't know why it is happening, so they need more care. uh, and in that sense, the preparedness is very important. And this very good. I mean, this also very good that the government of India has taken this part, mitigation and preparedness, very seriously. Like recently, we had this third national portal, NPDRR meeting, where the Honorable Prime Minister has focused on preparedness, how we should work on that. And this webinar is part of that preparedness, how we at the grassroots level, at the state level, at the district level, at the village level, should be ready to take the challenges come during and after the disaster, whether in the disaster, the flood or earthquake or tsunami, whatever disaster, we should be ready, because the local people are the first respondent, and this webinar will help prepare those local people right at the village level to get ready. So with that, I wish all the best for this series, and over to you, Dolphy. Thank you. You are mute, Dolphy. You are mute. Unmute yourself.
Thank you, sir. And thank you so much for this beautiful inaugural address and especially highlighting the preparedness part of it, which is also emphasizing on why we are doing this webinar so then the participants can set their own objectives as well for what to take away from the webinar. Thank you so much. And may I now please invite Dr. Kumar Raka, Senior Program Officer, CCDRR NIDM, to deliver the keynote address for this program today. Over to you, Dr. Raka.
Thank you very much, Dolphy. I'm audible. Okay. So once again, thank you very much. Once again, on behalf of National Institute of Disaster Management, Ministry of Home Affairs, Government of India, I would like to extend my heartfelt thanks to our partner organizations, NGCPA and Child Rights and You, for supporting us in organizing series of webinars. So let's talk about today's topic, children's mental health in disasters and emergencies. Normally, disasters and emergencies, whenever it happens, slow onset or rapid onset disaster, actually, it doesn't affect only the elders, but the children are also equally affected. Now, when we are talking about children, then first thing we have to understand that the children in as such is not a homogeneous group because of the variation in their age and gender related concerns as well. So different age group of children, different gender, accordingly different type of needs and requirements, and along with their coping capabilities and resiliency as well. And after any negative incident, like we adults used to suffer psychologically, the same is with children. And that it starts, that childhood actually starts from the very early age, 1 to 2 years, 12 to 13 years. And in that phase of the child, actually the mental development process, the process of cognitive development is at its peak, reaching अपने लेवल पे पहुंचने के लिए वो सबसे ज्यादा उस समय पेस में होता है. And if at the time the proper psychosocial care is not provided to children, so it can hamper, it may hamper their overall lifespan. We all know that, see, when we are talking about mental health, so the experts would be much more able to tell about that. But it's not only that you have PTSD or something like ASD, then only it's called mental disorder. Okay, that is mental disorder. But psychosocial care starts talking when we are feeling anxiety, depression, stress actually. And from that level, we have to take care of the victim. Otherwise, later on, it may create a lot of problems. And also, you know that when we're talking about mental health, then definitely we should understand trauma. And a projection by the World Bank says that trauma is prevalent in world's population almost between 33% to 90%, and it's much more higher in children. And once trauma starts, after that, the child starts facing intrusive memories, flashbacks, nightmares, avoiding the remembering trauma itself, and also like intense type of anxiety. Many times, not only major disasters I am talking about. Suppose that a child is very happily going to school. Okay, every day his routine is perfect. So every day morning he starts his day or her day and very happily going to school. But all of a sudden, all of a sudden the parents or the family members are now started observing कि अब उसको स्कूल जाने में डर लगता है, या स्कूल जाने के टाइम में ही वो पेट दर्द की शिकायत करने लगता है या हेडेक की शिकायत करता है. So immediately you have to understand that this is a behavior. जो behavior उसका पहले था, changes in the behavior has occurred, and there may be chances कि उसको स्कूल में कोई प्रॉब्लम हो रहा है, मे बी किसी टीचर से हो रहा है, किसी स्टाफ से हो रहा है, या हो सकता है पीर ग्रुप जो फ्रेंड ग्रुप है उसका उससे ही होने लगा है, और उसको एक एंग्जाइटी का लेवल या इस तरह का बढ़ चुका है उसके दिमाग में कि नाउ जो चीज उसको पहले करने में अच्छी लगती थी, व्हाट ही वाज फीलिंग वेरी हैप्पी डूइंग, नाउ ही इज अफ्रेड ऑफ डूइंग दैट. ही इज फीलिंग पेनफुल, बट ही इज नॉट एबल टू एक्सप्रेस इट बिकॉज ऑफ द एज. So behavioral changes, एक मैंने example दिया, and during COVID-19 we all have seen what type of anxiety actually, depression, trauma कैसे होता है, anxiety कैसे होती है, depression कैसे होता है. और आप if we remember COVID-19 time suicides in most of the states in India, it's still लगता है कि क्या हो रहा था, some sort of that. So the purpose of webinar, likely Dr. Sahin told, that we have to understand actually the nitty-gritty of mental health, so that at our own level as a stakeholder, whether we are parents or the family members or the government officials or the non-government officials, but we are dealing with children. Everyday life, when we are talking about CCDRR, I used to say that everyone is a stakeholder when we are talking about child-centered disaster risk reduction, because no life is without it. And once we start understanding the problem, the gaps, we start identifying it, and definitely we have expertise to handle it. And for that purpose, this webinar has been organized. And thank you very much, Dolphy, Dr. Sahin, Ranjanji, Neetika. Once again, I would like to extend my thanks to MGCPA, Chandigarh, and Child Rights and You for being associated with us in the series of webinar. And also I would like to convey our participants that please convey this message to your peers, your colleagues also, that NIDM, CRI, MGCPA, this type of organizations are actually inviting the best experts in the country, and we are discussing such issues which are every household issues. So the message is going a long way. So knowledge will be disseminated, and that is how the efforts of CCDRR and IDM will be, and our partners organizations also will be much more impactful. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Aka, for that. Yes, thank you so much, Dr. Aka, for that encouraging keynote address. So may I now begin the technical sessions and invite our first speaker? Sir,
Yes,
may
please
I
go ahead,
start
sir.
the session?
Thanks.
Okay, right. So to all our participants, now we are going to start our technical sessions. We are going to have 2 technical sessions today in this webinar. So may I please invite our first speaker today, Dr. Avneet Randhawa. Welcome, ma'am, and may I introduce her to the participants. Dr. Avneet Randhawa, she has an MBBS from Maulana Azad Medical College, New Delhi. She's an MD in Community Medicine from GMC Patiala. She's also trained in disaster management from Japan and has worked extensively in disaster management in relief and long-term recovery. She's also ECFMG, that is Education Commission for Foreign Medical Graduates. She also has that certification from the USA and has published various research articles in the preventative and social medicine. She is currently working as a medical officer with Government of Punjab in Patiala. So welcome, ma'am, and you may please start your session. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Dolphy. I just want to check if I'm audible enough to all.
Yes, you're yes. Clearly
Okay,
audible.
Thank you, Dolphy, for the kind words. I think I will start with my screen sharing.
Yes, please go ahead.
Just give me a second to share my PPT. Yes, is it visible to all?
Yes, it's clearly visible.
Okay. So, well, my topic for today is psychosocial care of children post COVID-19. I would be starting with a African proverb which says that it takes a whole village to raise a child. So, by this, what does it mean? It means that एक बच्चे की संपूर्ण परवरिश के लिए chacha, mama, taya, we need shopkeepers, we need different people from the community who provide sensory stimulation to a growing child, to the mind of a growing child. और रिसर्च ये कहती है कि जो एक बच्चे का दिमाग होता है when a child is growing up, जितना ज्यादा उसका सोशल इंटरैक्शन रहता है, जितनी ज्यादा उसको तरह तरह के ह्यूमन फेसेस, ह्यूमन डिफरेंट ह्यूमन साउंड्स, डिफरेंट ह्यूमन स्किन कलर का एक्सपोजर होता है, उतना ही ज्यादा अच्छा और बेहतर उसका social IQ रहता है, and the child is exposed to a society which provides him or her a sensory stimulation. So during the disaster of COVID was a biological disaster, और COVID जैसे biological disaster stripped the children from this benefit, the benefit of a sensory stimulation from the society, because people had become very isolated. We were cooped up in homes. There was a lot of, there was a social interaction which went missing. So our children are deprived at that level because of this post-pandemic period. Now, there are two terms which we hear very frequently when we talk about childhood. One is growth and one is development. Now, what do we understand by this? By growth, we mean the physical increase in size that is easily observed. जो हमें दिखाई देता है, बच्चे का वजन बढ़ रहा है, बच्चे की height बढ़ रही है, that is the growth. And for that, we need nutrition is the primary building block at that time for growth. And there is another term which is known as development, which is the psychosocial or the motor development of the child. Now, when we talk about development is the neurological architecture which is being framed when a child is being growing. And ये neurological system, उसका सारे जितने circuits बनते हैं, that will lead to the right development of a child. And we not directly see a development, we indirectly see it through the ability of a child to do things that are complex, जिसमें कि सोशल इंटरैक्शन भी आता है बच्चे का, मैथमेटिकल प्रॉब्लम सॉल्विंग आती है, एकेडमिक्स में बच्चा कैसा है, ऑल दैट विल बी डिपेंडेंट अपॉन how well the neurological architecture has been laid down in the child. So these are two terms which are very important, and we need to know that there is a difference between the two. और एक safe, secure और एक positive environment जो है, it is very important for laying down of this neurological architecture which leads to the right development of the child. बच्चे के फेज में एक क्रिटिकल पीरियड रहता है which is the time when the brain and the nervous system of the child is developing, and as we all know that 90% of the brain of the child is developed till 5 years of age. So that period is very important in the neurological development and the neurological maturity of a child. Although brain की rewiring 20 या 25 साल तक चलती रहती है, पर ये सारा जो पीरियड है, दिस होल पीरियड इज वेरी वेरी क्रिटिकल. ऑल्दो इट इज अ पीरियड ऑफ of a great opportunity also, but it is a period of great vulnerability also, क्योंकि अगर बच्चे के उस टाइम में, जैसे हमारे जो अभी वाले बच्चे हैं, they were exposed to the COVID pandemic, so it has left a lot of scarring in the development of these children. There is a saying also which says, give me the first 5 years of a child and take the rest. So ये जो initial period है एक individual के बनने में, we need to realize that it is a very, very important and a very critical period for how we will have our adult population. How strong and resilient will be the mental health of the adult population depends upon this period of development in a child. अब अगर देखें कि डिजास्टर्स में क्या रहता है, देर आर डिफरेंट फैक्टर्स. हेलो, आई होप आई एम ऑडिबल टू ऑल. आई हैवंट. Hello?
Yes, you are audible.
Okay, okay. So talking about how it happens during disasters, there are various factors which go wrong at the time of disasters. Like there is inadequate nutrition, there is environmental toxins which the individuals and the children are exposed to at the time of disasters. There is unstable caregiving, जिसमें कि पेरेंटल का there is a death of a parent, or there is displacement of the children. They had to, like we saw in COVID-19, there was so much of migration, change of homes, change of environment, change of home environment. And then there is limited stimulation which these children got, and limited positive stimulation, and overall the stress of the disaster. So all these negatively impact the development of the child, the neurological laying down of a child, which makes them vulnerable to so many mental disorders, to so many behavioral changes, and overall the neurological and the emotional robustness what a child without who was not exposed to a disaster could have. So we need to understand that post disasters हमारे बच्चे जो हैं बहुत ज़्यादा mentally vulnerable हो जाते हैं. कोविड की अगर बात करें, कोविड एक बायोलॉजिकल डिजास्टर था. देयर वाज अ लॉट ऑफ कांस्टेंट फियर जो हमारे बच्चों को फेस करना पड़ा. फियर था अननोन का, बिकॉज पेरेंट्स को भी बहुत चीज़ों का, हमें डिजीज की इटियोलॉजी ही नहीं पता थी स्टार्टिंग में, और अगर पता भी थी तो वी वर वेरी स्केर्ड कि अगर किसी को माइल्ड डिजीज होगी तो आगे क्या, व्हाट इज द प्रोग्नोसिस, सिवियर डिजीज है तो कैसा प्रोग्नोसिस रहेगा. सो देयर वाज अ फियर ऑफ अननोन, देयर वाज अ फियर ऑफ चिल्ड्रन हैविंग द फियर दैट दे माइट लूज देयर पेरेंट्स. अगर घर में डेथ हो जाए तो क्या होगा. इतना ज्यादा मीडिया में हर जगह पे डेथ वाज सो इजीली टॉक्ड अबाउट. सो आवर चिल्ड्रन वर एक्सपोज टू समथिंग जो कभी बच्चों को इक्का दुक्का बार सुनने में मिलता था कि so and so has died, but now it was the stress of online classes. It was a change, and online के बाद offline classes में transition जो हुआ, that change was also very stressful. school जैसे नहीं रहे, sanitizer, mask, social distancing, all these things were very new and challenging for our young growing minds. Then there was a lack of social interaction. As I said, social interaction जो है वो बच्चे की परवरिश के लिए बहुत ज़्यादा ज़रूरी होता है. Then there was a lot of isolation, migration, change of homes, lack of communication, और reciprocity बात करने में एक हम करते हैं, that's a station for the growing mind, which बिकॉज आपस में बातें बहुत कम हुई, तरह तरह के लोगों से जो मिलना था बच्चे ने वो कम हुआ. एंड अल्टीमेटली हमारे बच्चे देख क्या रहे थे, दे वर एक्सपोज टू डोमेस्टिक वायलेंस, दे वर एक्सपोज टू फिजिकल फैमिलियर डिस्प्यूट्स, केसेस बढ़ गए. देयर वाज इमोशनल अब्यूज, फिजिकल अब्यूज, सेक्सुअल अब्यूज. झुग्गी झोंपड़ियों में जब हमने देखा, हमने वहां जाके सिचुएशन का एनालिसिस किया, सो वी रियलाइज दैट बिफोर कोविड, लाइक किसी स्लम एरिया में जो पेरेंट्स थे, दे यूज्ड टू लीव होम्स फॉर वर्क एंड फॉर देयर लाइवलीहुड. बट वंस कोविड वाज देयर, सिंस दे वर लॉक्ड अप इनसाइड, the whole family was in a very scooped up in a very small room. So there was a lot of sexual abuse which happened with children during COVID. पेरेंट्स का लॉस ऑफ जॉब्स हुई, लॉस ऑफ लाइवलीहुड हुई, एंड देयर वाज ओवरऑल अ पेरेंटल फटीग, बिकॉज इवन इन गुड होम्स पेरेंट्स वर tired. There was a chronic fatigue that set in, and even in the post pandemic period एक तरह का parental fatigue जो है वो अभी तक linger on कर रहा है. And COVID ने एक digital divide भी कर दिया. Since education went online, कुछ घर थे जहां पर ऑनलाइन जो इंटरनेट था दैट वाज अवेलेबल, देयर वर इश्यूज विद दैट आल्सो. लाइक वी हर्ड अबाउट द केस इन गुड़गांव वेयर देयर वर ऑनलाइन बुलिंग, देयर वर साइबर क्राइम्स व्हिच इंक्रीज्ड. And who were the victims of these cyber crimes? Cyber crimes were done mostly by the youth, by the children, and the children were only the victims of it. So homes where there was an internet or a smartphone overload, they faced such problems, and there were homes where there was no internet or no smartphone, and they were losing on education. So there was, on either sides, there was a loss situation. अगर हम कुछ डेटा क्या देखें, यूनिसेफ की एक रिपोर्ट में it was released that there were 14% of young Indians who were depressed in COVID times. Very high number. Suicide के cases जो थे वो बहुत ज़्यादा बढ़ गए. और अगर हम देखें कि when does one commit a suicide, what is the last weakest link that, you know, which forces an individual to actually give up and commit a suicide, is when they feel that there is no one whom they can trust, whom they can share their problems with, or there is no one who can understand what the child is going through. That is when they take the extreme step of taking away their lives. So that is how our children felt, and that is how they are feeling even now. There are children who feel very, very emotionally neglected. They feel that they have been left out somewhere. Though the COVID disease showed a childhood sparing, बच्चों को COVID इतना नहीं हुआ, because there were certain receptors to which the COVID virus attaches, वो बच्चों में नहीं पाए जाते हैं, तो इसीलिए COVID उनको नहीं हुआ, COVID disease नहीं हुई as such, but long term impacts, जो mental health impacts हैं, वो बहुत ज़्यादा बच्चों में ज़्यादा देखे जा रहे हैं. And there was an upstrike of psychological trauma post COVID. Like अगर हम data देखें, so 2020 में every day there was a 31 children were committing suicides, which is a very, very high number. And as compared to 2019, there was a 18% rise in the incidence of suicides, and a 21% rise if we compare it with 2018. So we need to understand that our children somewhere are mentally fragile, have been left vulnerable, have been left at a spot where they need help, they need our assistance, they need adults to come forward and proactively take part and in understanding them. So the overall impact is that the young tender minds have been left scarred by this biological disaster of COVID. So as parents and as caregivers, we need to understand that their mental health needs attention, and we proactively need to assess and help them. And how we will be doing that, I will be talking in the subsequent slides. So a little bit more about what actually happens जब हमारा ह्यूमन माइंड बहुत देर तक स्ट्रेस में रहता है. जैसे कोविड पैंडेमिक 2 साल तक चला, 2 साल तक सिवियर स्ट्रेसर रहा हमारे आसपास, घरों में, schools में. So what happens that time is that the architecture of the developing brain becomes weak when there is a chronic stress. Brain में एक part रहता है amygdala, जिसका साइज जो, अगर मैं उन बच्चों की क्रॉनिक में, तो प्रीफ्रंटल जो हमारे ब्रेन का आगे वाला पार्ट रहता है, उसका साइज छोटा हो जाता है. सो स्ट्रेस इज सच अ थिंग that it can cause such severe organic changes in the size and the shape of a growing mind. लगातार जब स्ट्रेस रहता है, जैसे डिजास्टर के केस में रहा, कोविड के केस में रहा, तो हमारी बॉडी में, बच्चों की बॉडी में कॉर्टिसोल बहुत देर तक उसका लेवल बढ़ा हुआ रहता है, विच इज अ स्टीरॉयड हार्मोन. और हम जानते हैं कि स्टीरॉइड्स के लॉन्ग टर्म बहुत ज्यादा ड्रॉबैक्स रहते हैं. सो जब ये कॉर्टिसोल बहुत देर तक बढ़ा हुआ रहता है इन बच्चों में, सो व्हेन दे ग्रो अप, दे आर मोर वल्नरेबल टू डिजीजेस लाइक ओबेसिटी, डायबिटीज, हार्ट प्रॉब्लम्स, मेंटल डिसऑर्डर्स, and overall their immunity also goes down. So scientifically speaking, the long-term impacts of chronic stress are itself very significant in themselves. अगर हम मेंटल हेल्थ को सिर्फ लें, सिंस आवर टॉपिक नाउ इज साइकोसोशल, सो जो सबसे पहले चेंजेस बच्चे में देखने को मिलते हैं जब वो बहुत स्ट्रेस में रहे, लॉन्ग टर्म स्ट्रेस में रहता है, सो द फर्स्ट थिंग्स टू हैव टू शो चेंजेस आर द नेचुरल रिदम्स. बॉडी की हमारी नेचुरल रिदम्स रहती हैं, जिसमें भूख लगना, सोना, टॉयलेट जाना, these are the natural rhythms. So these are the ones जो सबसे पहले अफेक्ट होती हैं. बच्चे की नींद आने में दिक्कत रहती है, उसको भूख नहीं लगती, अगर भूख लगती भी है तो he wants to go in and have a junk food craving. Because why junk food? Because junk food खाने से हमारा शुगर लेवल एकदम स्पाइक करता है. When it spikes, the child is good, but when it goes down, जब ये स्पाइक जैसे ऊपर जाती है वैसे ही जब सडन ड्रॉप होता है, there are mood swings which children have. And जब ये frequently ये mood swings होते हैं तो the child overall becomes very very irritable. There are crying spells, बार बार रोता है बच्चा, उसको आप समझाने की कोशिश करते हैं, he or she does not understand. There are massive meltdowns with the child have. और कई बार तो घरों में इतनी ज्यादा बच्चों के आसपास झगड़े होने लग जाते हैं बच्चों को लेकर ही, उसके बिहेवियर को लेकर ही, that there are shouting matches, door slammings that go on. So it's the natural rhythm that goes, the change in mood, धीरे धीरे behavior में change, फिर बच्चे के relationships में change with the parents, with the caregivers, and ultimately the child withdraws. And there are two spectrums जो देखने को मिलते हैं. या तो बच्चा बहुत ज्यादा cold हो जाता है, withdrawn हो जाता है, उसको किसी से लेना देना नहीं, वो अपने में अपना फोन लेके बैठ जाएगा, बहुत ज्यादा frantic फोन स्क्रीन व्यूइंग करेगा, या बहुत ज्यादा पैनिक और एंजाइटी उसको होगी. थोड़ा सा भी स्टिमुलस आने पर he or she will become very anxious or panicky. So these are the symptoms which we have to identify, have to be watchful. थोड़ा और इनके बारे में बात करें, टॉडलर्स जो 3 साल बच्चे होते हैं उनमें हम कई बार होता है कि उन्होंने कुछ माइलस्टोन्स अचीव कर लिए हैं, जैसे वो टॉयलेट ट्रेन हो गया है बच्चा, बट सिंस वो क्रॉनिक स्ट्रेसर में रहा कोविड के टाइम, मे बी डायरेक्टली कोविड से या वो पहले टॉयलेट ट्रेन था, बेड पे सुसु नहीं करता था, बट अब ही हैज स्टार्टेड बेड वेटिंग. और द चाइल्ड बिकम्स ओवरली अटैच, बहुत क्लिंगी बिहेवियर, माँ को छोड़ता ही नहीं, या कोई केयर टेकर है और उसका तो उसको छोड़ता ही नहीं, या वो बहुत ज्यादा बच्चे 10 years of age, they have vague symptoms, they present with symptoms जैसे बहुत ज्यादा पेट में दर्द बोलेंगे, उल्टी आने जैसा बोलेंगे, सुबह स्कूल जाने का मन ना करना, anxious होना, angry रहना, हर बात पे गुस्सा आना. So all these behaviors are not right for a child, and a caregiver should be watchful and should seek मेडिकल अटेंशन अगर ऐसे सिम्टम्स आते हैं. जो थोड़े बड़े बच्चे हैं उनमें हम देखते हैं सब्सटेंस अब्यूज, नशा को इजीली दे फॉल प्रे टू अब्यूज, हाई रिस्क बिहेवियर रखते हैं. अल्कोहल का सेवन जो है वो बहुत ज्यादा बढ़ रहा है इन आवर यूथ. Then screen addiction has also become a very very major problem, not just in the youth but also in young children and also even in toddlers. So screen addiction also is something which is very worrisome and which should be addressed. एंड ओवरऑल अल्टीमेटली हमारे कॉग्निटिव जो चेंजेस आती हैं जिसमें हमारी एकेडमिक्स में पुअर परफॉर्मेंस बनने लग जाती है, मेमोरी जो है वो डिटीरियोरेट होने लग जाती है बच्चे की, क्रॉनिक स्ट्रेसर से जो गुजरा है उसको कुछ याद नहीं रहता, उसकी लर्निंग स्लो हो जाती है, उसका मन नहीं करता पढ़ने का, उसका कम्युनिकेशन जो है वो पुअर होने लग जाता है. सो दीज आर द सिम्टम्स. और कॉग्निटिव कैपेबिलिटीज थोड़ी लेटर स्टेज पे आती हैं. academic performance, academic deterioration जो है that is almost like the last thing to show up. But उससे पहले as I said that the natural rhythms, भूख में changes, सोने में changes, ये सारी चीजें जो हैं these are the early signs which should be picked up by the caregivers and be addressed. So this is a typical condition when a child is seeking help in academics, he or she is not able to manage it by himself or herself. So अब सवाल उठता है कि हमें करना कैसे है, हाउ डू वी एड्रेस. जैसे हम देखते हैं जब कोई पौधा है जिसमें फूल लगने हो, उसको when there is no flowering in that plant, just reading out the quotation, it says when a flower doesn't bloom fix the environment in which it goes. Similar is the case with our children. हमने उन पे नहीं उतना काम करना जितने उनके आसपास के environment को positive, safe और secure बनाना है. So basically, it is the caregivers who has to learn how to deal with children, how to address these problems. So caregivers में हमारे parents, teachers, family members ये सब लोग आते हैं. एंड देखा गया है कि जब जो केयर गिवर्स अपना इंटरैक्शन बच्चे के साथ चेंज करते हैं तो बच्चे का स्ट्रेस लेवल बहुत ज्यादा कम हो जाता है. इन इंटरैक्शन आई मीन लाइक जब हम बच्चों से बात करते हैं, जो पहली चीज जो बच्चे नोटिस करते हैं दैट इज द टोन जिसमें हम उनसे बात करते हैं, और हमारा एक्सप्रेशन कैसा है, हमारा फेशियल एक्सप्रेशन कैसा है. सो वी हैव टू बी वेरी कॉशियस अबाउट आवर टोन एंड आवर एक्सप्रेशन व्हेन वी आर डीलिंग विद आवर चिल्ड्रन. दे से दैट डोंट रेज योर चिल्ड्रन, रेज योरसेल्फ. सो हम इसी स्ट्रैटेजी पर अपनी डीलिंग्स बच्चों के साथ जो है वो ऑल्टर करके उनको एक पॉजिटिव एनवायरनमेंट देने की कोशिश करेंगे. सो एंड जब बच्चों को हेल्प चाहिए होती है, when they are having difficult feelings, they find it, they do not like to express it. उनको मुश्किल आती है बताने में अपने केयर गिवर को, क्योंकि पहली बात तो उनको यही नहीं पता होता कि उनके साथ हो क्या रहा है, what is actually going on in their internal system. एंड इसलिए वो एक्सप्रेस नहीं कर पाते, और अगर एक्सप्रेस करना भी चाहते हैं तो उनको लगता है कि कोई उनकी बात सुनेगा नहीं, क्योंकि वो दे आर चिल्ड्रन एंड वी आर एडल्ट्स. सो वी हैव ऑलरेडी प्लेस्ड आवर चिल्ड्रन एट अ पोजिशन दैट दे फील one less than us. So they feel that they will not be heard. And even if they are heard, they feel कि maybe मेरे को ऐसे इग्नोर कर दिया जाएगा या मजाक उड़ा दिया जाएगा या मेरा ये एक्सप्रेस करना लोगों को अच्छा नहीं लगेगा. So that is when they are not able to express themselves. So the caregivers need to observe, क्योंकि बच्चा खुद से नहीं बताएगा हमें. We have to be more vigilant. We have to gauge their concerns. We have to see what is actually happening in the inner world of the child. So now, how do we do it? We do it by giving a emotionally safe space to our children. घर में भी और स्कूल में भी. We have to be present emotionally with our child. Not just providing physical needs, खाना, पानी, shelter, ये सब देना तो देना ही है हमें अपने बच्चों को, पर उन्हें हमें we have to be emotionally present with them. We have to connect emotionally with them. कई बार होता है जो mothers हमारे पास clinics में आती हैं, वो कहती है मैं तो इसके साथ घर पे रहती हूँ, I'm a housewife, I'm always available with my child. How we do it for connecting at an emotional level with your child, आपको उसको उसके एक्सप्रेशन देना है बच्चे को. जितनी ज्यादा हम अनहैप्पी फीलिंग्स को स्नब करेंगे, पुश करेंगे, उतनी ही ज्यादा बच्चा उसमें उलझ के रह जाता है. द चाइल्ड बिकम्स मोर स्ट्रक विद दोज नेगेटिव फीलिंग्स. सो इट इज इम्पोर्टेंट कि बच्चा उसको वॉइस करे, उसको बोले, एंड उसके बोलने के लिए इट इज इम्पोर्टेंट दैट यू एक्सेप्ट द बैड फीलिंग्स ऑफ द चाइल्ड. द मोर you accept, the better and the calmer and stress free the child feels. सो हमें ध्यान रखना है कि हमें कनेक्ट होना है बच्चे से रादर देन उसे करेक्ट करना है. सो कनेक्टिंग रादर देन करेक्टिंग. वी डोंट हैव टू टेल हिम दैट नहीं नहीं ऐसा नहीं फील करते, ये तो कोई बात ही नहीं बनी. थिंग्स लाइक एक्सप्रेशंस लाइक दिस शुड बी अवॉइडेड. सो व्हेन विल द चाइल्ड express or when will the child share? The child will share when he feels that usko wo suna, somebody is listening to him. So for that there is an active listening which the parent has to learn and has to do. Active listening say the child feels more safe, he feels more heard. एंड एक्टिव लिसनिंग करनी कैसे है? एक्टिव लिसनिंग में हमें अपनी 100% अटेंशन बच्चे को देनी है. ऐसा नहीं कि मदर जो है वो फोन देख रही है या फादर फोन देख रहा है या टीवी देख रहा है व्हेन द चाइल्ड हैज कम टू से समथिंग टू यू. यू हैव टू लुक आई टू आई विद द चाइल्ड, प्रेफरेबली एट द सेम लेवल विद द चाइल्ड. यू हैव टू it should be a non-distracted attention. जैसे मैंने बोला मोबाइल, टीवी ये सब छोड़ के उसकी तरफ उस पे पूरा ध्यान देना है, उसको इंटरप्ट नहीं करना है. When he starts to speak, you have to listen patiently. You don't have to judge him or come to conclusions और कई बार हम सुनते हैं, ऐसा सुनते हैं जवाब देने के लिए सुनते हैं, हम अपना आंसर प्रिपेयर कर रहे हैं तो हम सुन नहीं रहे हैं, हम पार्शियली सुन रहे हैं, पर हम पार्शियली अपना जवाब तैयार कर रहे हैं. So we should know that we don't have to listen to answer, we have to listen to listen. एंड एट टाइम जरूरी नहीं कि आप हर कंसर्न पे, बच्चे के हर इशू पे कुछ आपको जवाब देना ही है. इट कैन बी अ सिंपैथेटिक साइलेंस आल्सो एट टाइम्स. इफ द चाइल्ड इज सेइंग दैट आई एम फाइंडिंग इट डिफिकल्ट इन स्कूल, यू कैन मे बी आस्क हिम अ शॉर्ट क्वेश्चन कि हाउ, कैसे, क्या दिक्कत आ रही है. एंड एट टाइम्स दे कैन बी अ सिचुएशन इन विच यू डोंट हैव टू रिएक्ट, you have to be silent. So it's important that you don't start planning what to say next. You don't impose your opinions और अपने solutions उनको immediately देने की वो anxiety ना रखें. You can ask short questions, and it is important कि the parent also very regulated, emotionally regulated when you are dealing with your children. कई बार क्या होता है, हमें खुद हमारे trigger points होते हैं, कुछ चीजें हमें जो है वो सुनते ही गुस्सा आ रहा है. So that our children, it is important that you help yourself first and help them in the long term. So it's a calm and soothing parent होना बहुत ज़्यादा important. हमारे क्लिनिक्स में अपने जो पेशेंट्स आते हैं, जैसे डिफिकल्ट फैमिली से जो पेरेंट्स आते हैं, हम उन्हें 5 to 10 minutes आई टू आई कॉन्टैक्ट करने को कहते हैं विद देयर चिल्ड्रन, जिसमें कि देर इज नो स्क्रीन विच इज इन्वॉल्व. ऐसा नहीं कि एक जना बोल रहा है और दूसरा जना स्क्रीन को देख रहा है. सो द पेरेंट एंड द चाइल्ड लुक आई टू आई व्हेन दे आर कन्वर्सिंग, जब वो बात कर रहे हैं. और ऐसा वो 5 से 10 मिनट पूरे दिन में करना. We ensure that they practice this, and it leaves the child very calm and very comfortable for the hours to come. So although ये ज़्यादा लंबा नहीं है, 5 से 10 मिनट का है, and it is a very good practice, it should be done. Now, helping children with feelings is also very important. There is a thing known as echoing, जिसमें कि जब बच्चा अपने पेरेंट को या अपनी टीचर को या अपने केयर गिवर को या अपने किसी ट्रस्टेड इंडिविजुअल को अपनी फीलिंग्स बताता है, एंड बिलीव यू मी, इट इज नॉट इजी टू शेयर योर फीलिंग्स. सो वंस अ चाइल्ड कम्स टू यू सेइंग दैट यू नो कि मैं बड़ा दुखी हूँ या मैं बड़ा परेशान हूँ या मुझे अच्छा नहीं लगता स्कूल जाना, सो इट इज इम्पॉर्टेंट दैट आप उसको तभी काउंटर एक्ट ना करें, उसको अपोज ना करें. इंस्टेड यू डू एकोइंग. एकोइंग है जैसे आवाज की एको आती है, जैसा हम बोलते हैं वैसा ही हमें वापस सुनाई देता है. तो हमें सेम प्रैक्टिस अपने बच्चों के फीलिंग्स एक्सप्रेशन के साथ करनी है. वी हैव टू रिपीट द सेम थिंग व्हाट दे आर सेइंग. सो इफ अ चाइल्ड इज सेइंग दैट आई एम अपसेट, सो यू विल comprehend it, you will acknowledge it, and you will say yes, it is upsetting. स्कूल जाना मुश्किल तो है. लाइक अगर किसी की फैमिली में डेथ हो गई है, या मान लो डिजास्टर के टाइम किसी पेट की डेथ हो गई या किसी पेरेंट की डेथ हो गई, सो यू विल से इट बैक दैट यस, फैमिली मेंबर का चले जाना बहुत मुश्किल होता है. या किसी फ्रेंड का चले, सपोजिंग अ फ्रेंड हैज माइग्रेटेड और हैज लेफ्ट स्कूल, सो यू विल echo the same feeling that yes, you cared for your friend and now he has left. I understand that ये मुश्किल चीज होती है, और I can feel what you're feeling. So that ways, once you acknowledge the feelings of the child, they feel connected with you. You create a bond with your child. And at times zaruri nahi that you have to repeat the same thing, even just saying I see, हाँ ऐसा तो है. So things like this also make and help you to create a bond with your child. कुछ चीजें जो हमें अवॉइड करनी चाहिए, दैट इज अथॉरिटेटिव पेरेंटिंग और अथॉरिटेटिव केयर गिविंग, जिसमें कि हम अपने आप को एक पोजीशन ऊपर रख लेते हैं अपने बच्चे से, और हम उसको एडवाइस देते हैं, हम उसको किसी ऑर्डर देते हैं. जैसे कोई बच्चा परेशान है तो हम कहते हैं कि अरे इसमें क्या है, ये क्या हो गया, ये तो कोई बात ही नहीं है अपसेट होने की. या हम कह देते हैं यू बीइंग टू अनरीजनेबल. So like that, when we say these kind of things, you get into disagreement with the feelings your child is having. So this kind of an authoritative way, like अगर बच्चा स्कूल नहीं जाना चाहता और आप कहते हैं कि स्कूल तो जाना ही पड़ेगा, स्कूल तो बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है, स्कूल जाना है, so will disconnect you from your child. It is authoritative way, it is not advisable. And we get into disagreement with their emotions. हमारा main objective है कि हमें उनसे emotionally connect होना है पहले, उसके बाद you can give your advice in a milder way eventually, but initially when they are expressing, that is when you will acknowledge their feelings. And हमें भी तो कितना अच्छा लगता है जब हमारी भी कोई feelings को कोई समझता है. Similarly, children also seek outwardly acknowledgement, and it feels, believe me, it feels wonderful when you feel that आपकी feeling को कोई समझ रहा है. That experience is itself very wonderful. And once you acknowledge the feeling, the child will also recognize the feeling, and he or she will process that feeling, and then the negative emotions get released. So negative emotions को release करने के लिए सबसे पहली step है acknowledgement. As an outsider, as a caregiver, हमें acknowledge करना है उनकी feelings को, so that they can process it. एंड एट टाइम्स जरूरी नहीं कि हमें इमीडिएट सोल्यूशन भी देना है, आप चुप भी रह सकते हैं, बिकॉज बोर होना भी कहीं ना कहीं बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है. कई बार चिल्ड्रन गेट बोर्ड, एंड टू बी बोर्ड इज ऑल्सो नॉट अ वेरी बैड थिंग. Children also have to learn कि अपना solution, अपना how to wrestle with their emotions, that is also important. That is also emotional. It is a part of emotional growing up. So instant advice देना भी is not very conducive. And ब्लेमिंग देम और क्वेश्चनिंग देम और एडवाइजिंग देम, जब हम ऐसा करते हैं तो बच्चा खुद से कोई सोल्यूशन नहीं बना पाता, बिकॉज हमने बाहर से उसे कह दिया तुम्हें तो अपसेट होना ही नहीं चाहिए. सो द स्टोरी एंड्स देयर. ही कैन नॉट प्रोसेस दैट फीलिंग, ही कैन नॉट फाइंड अ सोल्यूशन टू इट, एंड अल्टीमेटली ही स्ट्रक विद दैट नेगेटिव फीलिंग फॉर लॉन्ग. और जितना ज्यादा चाइल्डहुड ट्रॉमा, थॉट से ही चाइल्डहुड ट्रॉमा बनता है. हमने देखा है कि जब चाइल्डहुड ट्रॉमा रहता है विच इज अनहील्ड, which is not addressed, it goes on to become, a lot of there are behavioral changes as an adult, there are personality defects, there are mental health issues that come up later on in life when our childhood traumas and our childhood issues are not addressed. So if we want a very relaxed child, it is very important that we permit expression of a lot of unhappiness. वो हमें अपने जो issues हैं, जो negative feelings हैं, वो express करें, उतना ही ज़्यादा अच्छा है. फीलिंग्स को बताने के लिए, एक्सप्रेस करने के लिए ज़रूरी है कि फीलिंग्स का नाम पता हो बच्चों को. सो इट इज़ इम्पॉर्टेंट दैट दे नो दैट दिस इज सैडनेस, दिस इज गिल्ट, दिस इज बोर्डम, दिस इज डाउटफुलनेस, दिस इज हाउ यू फील व्हेन इट इज फ्रस्ट्रेटेड. सो वंस दे कैन नेम द फीलिंग, दे कैन एक्सप्रेस इट एंड दे फील बेटर. बस नाम ले देना ही उस फीलिंग का eases the child to quite an extent. Now the question comes, how do they get to know कि वो feelings को name कैसे करना है. Okay, that is in the subsequent slide. So before that, I just want to bring up that, uh, when a child gets a word for his experience or his feelings, it deeply hurts them. How to label their feelings is आप बातों बातों में अपने बच्चे को सिखा सकते हैं. Like, just to give an example, कुछ आपको दिखाना चाहता है, some maybe artwork or some homework which he has done very well. So you can, if you are not in a mood to actually see it at that time, you can tell him that right now मैं थोड़ा थका हुआ हूँ, I'm a little distracted, मैं मुझे थोड़ी मैं टेंशन में भी हूँ क्योंकि मेरे ऑफिस में आज बहुत काम था, तो हम डिनर करने के बाद तुम्हारा ये काम देख लेंगे. सो जब आप ये उसे कहते हैं, you firstly make the child understand that it is okay to feel frustrated, it is okay to feel tired, it is okay to be distracted and tensed, and you have labeled that feeling also. So indirectly we have to teach our children that how they have to what are the labeling of each feeling, and it is okay to express. Another way which helps our children a lot as caregivers is the language with which we use. जैसे हम words को frame करते हैं और बोलते हैं उनके सामने, वो बहुत important है. हम जनरली यू लैंग्वेज का बहुत यूज करते हैं, जिसमें हम बच्चे की तरफ पॉइंटर लगाते हैं और उसको बोलते हैं. जैसे सपोजिंग इफ देयर इज अ चाइल्ड हु इज वेरी इररिस्पॉन्सिबल, पोस्ट कोविड है, पोस्ट पैंडेमिक है, थोड़ी लापरवाही भी है, बचपना भी है, तो हम अगर अपने बच्चों को बोलने लग जाएंगे दैट यू आर इररिस्पॉन्सिबल, यू आर वेरी इररिस्पॉन्सिबल एज अ चाइल्ड. सो इंस्टेड ऑफ पुटिंग इट लाइक दैट, you can use the you instead you can use the I instead of the you need to say that I worry about a lot about the fact कि तुम चीजें भूल जाते हो, मुझे बहुत दिक्कत होने लग गई है कि तुम थोड़े जो है अपना सामान यहाँ वहाँ छोड़ आते हो। लाइक सपोजिंग अगर हमें होता है कि उसके फ्रेंड्स अच्छे नहीं है बच्चे के, सो इंस्टेड ऑफ सेइंग दैट योर फ्रेंड्स आर स्पॉइलिंग यू, इट इज इंपॉर्टेंट टू से दैट मुझे बहुत घबराहट होती है कि तुम्हारे फ्रेंड्स तुम्हें गलत बिहेवियर ना सिखा दें। So, and another example, like instead of saying you don't care about my feelings, as a parent, you need to say that I feel uncared for, or I feel unheard. So, changing the you to I makes the child relate to the problem, and that problem becomes a problem for both the parent and the child. So once we say you, more of you, so we blame, it's as if we are blaming the child or we are accusing the child. So जब वो एक कॉमन प्रॉब्लम की तरह बच्चा उस इशू को देखेगा, तो ही और शी विल ऑल्सो ट्राई टू फाइंड अ सोल्यूशन टू इट। ही माइट से दैट ओके, हाँ कई दिनों से मैं भी सोच रहा हूँ कि मैं भी सामान यहाँ वहाँ छोड़ देता हूँ, तो मैं अब ध्यान रखूंगा। But if you will keep blaming him, he will never come to, he will never mellow down, or he will never step down to actually come to a solution with the problem. For teachers, since अब active school पूरा teachers जो है उनको question पूछने की we allow them to question. Generally हमारा जो educational system change, we should a lot of whatever they want to ask, share. We need to recognize as teachers what they are experiencing. We need to support them, let them talk, let them speak, let them ventilate. जब तक बच्चा ventilate नहीं करेगा, उसके जो भी COVID time के traumas हैं, issues हैं, he or she will never open up. So acknowledging their feelings as teachers is important. It connects them with their inner reality. उनको कैसा लग रहा है, they start to feel that, and they then gather strength to cope with how they are feeling. And कई बार हम as caregivers एक broad statement दे देते हैं कि okay, you're feeling like that, I understand you're feeling low or you feel not feeling good, but children are very smart. They understand कि आपने कुछ specific तो बोला नहीं और आपने सिर्फ बोल दिया I understand. Heart of heart they will be quiet, but they will feel that आप बस ऐसे ही बोलने के लिए ही कह रहे हैं that you understand. So it is important that we become very specific when we are showing our concern to our children. Like अगर कुछ लंबी ब्रेक के बाद स्कूल खुला है, so it is important to say that हाँ इतने दिनों बाद स्कूल आना तो मुश्किल होता है. So this is something known as mirroring. हम एक मिरर की तरह जो उनकी फीलिंग है हमने उनको वही फीलिंग रिफ्लेक्ट कर दी. सो इट इज इंपॉर्टेंट टू बी स्पेसिफिक अबाउट व्हेन यू आर शोइंग योर कंसर्न. थिंग्स लाइक making the children draw their feelings is a very good practice. Teachers can give plain pages to them, and you can make the child draw his or her feelings, so they will make a sad smiley or a happy smiley. So encouraging them to express through paper is also a good way out. एंड कई बार हमने देखा है कि कुछ बच्चे होते हैं स्कूल में वो जो बहुत एक्टिव, दे आर वेरी एनर्जेटिक एंड दे आर वेरी हाइपर एक्टिव. सो द टीचर्स कैन मेक देम द मॉनिटर्स. जब हम एवरीबडी वांट्स टू बी रिकॉग्नाइज्ड इन दिस वर्ल्ड, सो व्हेन द चाइल्ड इज बिहेविंग इन अ हाइपर एक्टिव वे बिकॉज मे बी ही इज नॉट गेटिंग द अटेंशन, ही वांट्स टू सीक अटेंशन. सो वंस यू मेक हिम इन चार्ज ऑफ द डिसिप्लिन, you make him the monitor or the prefect of the class, you will start seeing a lot of change in that child's behavior. एज टीचर्स एंड एज केयर गिवर्स घर पे भी हम बेली ब्रीदिंग जो है वो प्रैक्टिस कर सकते हैं अपने बच्चों के साथ, जिसमें हम पेट पे हाथ रखते हैं और जब हम सांस अंदर लेते हैं तो वी इंश्योर कि हमारा पेट बाहर को आए, एंड व्हेन वी एक्सहेल, जब हम सांस छोड़ते हैं तो पेट अंदर को जाए. So this phase, children have gone through a very big and a very unusual kind of disasters. Teachers should also be in close listening with the parents ताकि we can notice any behavioral and emotional change जो बच्चों में दिख रहे हैं. So we can immediately identify such behavioral changes, and we can seek medical help when and where required. As parents
Just a
also,
moment,
it is
Dr.
important कि
Avneet,
हम
one reminder that your time is about to be
yes,
over. You may take like 5 more minutes to finish.
okay,
Would that be okay?
okay. Yes, that's fine.
Okay, thank
So
you.
I will skip some part from the parental part. Okay, I will just talk about two questions which can be very instant questions which help you really connect very fast with your child. Things like अगर हम जैसे बच्चों से पूछें कि क्या fun activities करेंगे हम आज. So this question is a very strong question which really brings the parent and the child disconnect immediately to each other. It connects the two. It ensures a strong bond immediately. So this should be practiced. And then there is another question, like as parents you need to ask कि आपके friends के बीच में आजकल क्या बातें चलती हैं, क्या बातें होती हैं, in a very casual way you need to ask your child. क्योंकि कई बार बच्चे जो हैं stories या non scientific चीजें बना लेते हैं and they get into a world or they are being troubled with some question which they are unanswered with. So it is important to also ask them this question, that what are your friends saying about such and such issue, or what are you friends as friends talking about. As parents it is important that joint activities करनी बच्चों के साथ बहुत important है. Nature walks करें, इकट्ठे टाइम स्पेंड करें, इकट्ठे गेम्स खेलें, इकट्ठे बोर्ड गेम्स खेलना बहुत ज़्यादा important है. So as parents we need to be their dependable friends, we need to be their guides in distress and then an advisor. So लंबे लंबे sermons और advices जो हम देते हैं, that just goes into deaf ears of the children, so they should be avoided. One last thing which is very important, which I want to really focus on, is screen time and screen addiction. This is something which is very common nowadays, that जब भी बच्चे को कुछ दिक्कत लगती है इमोशनली, वो अच्छा नहीं फील करता, तो वो फटाफट फोन लेके फोन invite. So what is a way to reduce this? How do we deal with this screen addiction? Firstly, we need to understand it's like and the brain complex organ. It is like हम किसी सिगरेट स्मोकर की एकदम से सिगरेट लेके छीन के फेंक देंगे तो हमसे दुश्मन उसका कोई नहीं होगा. Same is with our children. They are quite dependent on their mobiles nowadays. अगर हम उनके मोबाइल छीन के फेंक देंगे, so we break our bond with our child. So how do we actually do it now? We have to sit down with the child, we have to reflect how much of screen viewing they are doing. हर फोन में आजकल स्मार्टफोन में screen time analysis है. So you need to open that and you need to tell the child कि आप इतने घंटे देखो, आप फोन पे बिताते हो, इतने घंटे इस साइट पे बिताते हो, यूट्यूब पे बिताते हो, और इतनी देर. एंड देन यू नीड टू टेल देम, यू नीड टू मेक देम अवेयर दैट डू यू थिंक ये ठीक है. और आप ये भी मेंशन करें कि मैंने देखा है कि जब तुम बहुत फोन यूज करते हो तो तुम चिड़चिड़े हो जाते हो, आपका अटेंशन स्पैन कम हो जाता है, आप बात नहीं करते. कोई कल घर आया था एंड आपने फोन से ऊपर देखा ही नहीं उसकी तरफ. सो वी नीड टू डिस्कस इट विद देम एज अ प्रॉब्लम, keeping them in our good faith, and we then need to substitute that. Like हम smokers में भी substitution therapy देते हैं, निकोटीन के पैचेस लगाते हैं. सिमिलरली हमने जो फोन की व्यूइंग जो है, अगर उसको हम डेली आधा घंटा कम करेंगे, तो आपने उसको सब्सटीट्यूट करना है विद क्वालिटी टाइम इन विच यू एंड योर चाइल्ड प्ले गेम्स टुगेदर. आइदर यू आर व्यूइंग पुरानी एल्बम्स आप देखें, उसके साथ बैठकर कोई बोर्ड गेम्स खेलें, उससे बातें करें जिसमें कि यू आर टॉकिंग विद द चाइल्ड अबाउट हिज और हर चाइल्डहुड, बिकॉज दैट इज समथिंग विच चिल्ड्रन कनेक्ट विद इमीडिएटली. और हर बच्चे को अपनी बचपन की बातें सुनना अच्छा लगता है. सो यू रीटेलिंग द स्टोरीज कि वो बचपन में कैसा करता था. सो दैट इज हाउ यू विल gradually reduce his screen hours. And कई घरों में हमने ये भी देखा कि पेरेंट्स आते हैं ओपीडी में बताने के लिए कि बहुत फोन देखता है बच्चा, बट देन वो खुद भी बहुत ज्यादा फोन देखते हैं एज पेरेंट्स. सो वी नीड टू चेक आवर बिहेवियर ऑल्सो, दैट आर वी screen addict ourselves. We need to first check that and gradually reduce that screen viewing. Even TV viewing, अगर आपने TV भी देखना है तो make it a co-viewing, कि सब साथ में बैठ के TV देखते हैं, एक discipline हो, इतने से इतने घंटे. And phone should not be a privilege, कि it should be a privilege. It should not be that आप जब emotionally down feel करें तो phone उठा लें. phone should be given after he or she has completed his homework, or there is a firm discipline on when the phone can be taken up by the child. घर के कामों में बच्चों को इन्वॉल्व करना बहुत ज्यादा important है. एक routine रहता है उससे, and they feel confident, their self esteem improves once they complete a task. जब भी हम कोई छोटे काम finish करते हैं तो dopamine hormone release, so we should this काम देना उनको, in fact it helps them in their growth and development. And to make sure performances जो है वो कम गई, they have gone down. So we should value the intentions जो बच्चे ने जो hard work put in किया है, rather than measuring the outcomes, the result as such, the percentage as such. And we should never look for them to see how well the teacher has taught. As an insider, as a caregiver, as a parent, it is important कि आप उसकी उसकी intentions, जितनी उसने मेहनत की है उस पे ध्यान दें, और अपने आप से ही उसका competition बनाएं कि पिछले साल वाली क्लास में you studied for this many hours a day, this year you will study a little more. So it is competing with oneself only. And not labeling the child is also very important. At times हम बच्चे को बहुत casually चीजें बोल देते हैं कि तुम तो बुद्धू हो, या तुम तो समझते ही नहीं चीजों को. So never label the child, because once you label a child, it leaves no scope for improvement. So these things should be, one should be very cautious when dealing with your children. To summarize, it is important that the child should be able to label his or her emotions. As caregivers, one should acknowledge their emotions, validate their emotions, help them express, help them ventilate, talk, speak, and we need to listen actively to all their concerns. We need to show our support, and we need to reassure them कि हम उनके साथ हैं. We need to provide extra love and attention, especially since the children are out of a long time, long-term disaster. There was a COVID pandemic, and we need to do joint activities with our children to secure the bond, and also have a routine with them. And they need to participate in household activities. So this is all I had to say. The last slide is that children are little people. ये हमारी height तक तो आ नहीं सकते, but we certainly can bend to listen to them, to bend and to reach at their level, so that we have a bond, we have a strong bonding with them. We need a childhood which should be scar free. We don't want our children to have any childhood traumas, and we need our children to be mentally resilient, robust. They need to feel safe, so that they can face challenges in life and later on as adults. So thank you so much. That is all I had to say.
Thank you so much, Dr. Avneet, for this wonderful presentation, and I'm sure the participants have learned a lot. So I want to request the participants to kindly post their questions to our speakers in the chat box, and we'll get back to your questions in the last half of our webinar, when the second speaker has also presented. So we'll have the question answer round at the end of both the presentations today. So we would request Dr. Avneet to be present for the question answer round as well at the end. And also, with respect to the certificates, the participants need to go to the NIDM portal and register themselves over there, and over there find this course. This course is called Psychosocial Care of Children During Disasters and Emergencies. And you enroll yourself in that course, and then if you have attended the 80%, more than 80% of today's webinar, your certificate will be generated after 2 to 3 days, and it will be sent to you. You will need to submit a feedback form before you get your certificate. You will be sent that after 2 to 3 days. So what you need to do today is go to the training portal of NIDM, register yourselves, and enroll yourself in this program. You can do that after you have attended the webinar as well. So that won't be an issue. So please remember to register yourself in the portal and enroll for this course to get your certificate. Thank you so much. And now may I please welcome our next speaker, Dr. Jay Kumar. Sir, are you here on the
म्यूट मैडम को स्क्रीन शेयर थोड़ा सा रिमूव करने के लिए बोल रहा हूँ.
हाँ जी. Nazia, can you please make Dr. Jay Kumar the presenter? Thank you. And in meanwhile, may I please introduce Dr. Jay Kumar to the participants. Dr. Jay Kumar, an alumni of NIMHANS Bangalore, is trained in disaster psychosocial care and mental health. His major work areas are psychosocial care and disaster mental health, stress management, and well-being for the disaster workers and first responders. His work spans over 22 years of field experience in natural hazards and human-induced disasters. As former senior consultant in NDMA, he was responsible for preparation and release of NDMA guidelines on psychosocial care. He is presently preparing a national module on psychosocial care for NDMA. He also spearheaded the COVID-19 psychosocial care for Central Health Ministry. He is also a valued resource person to various ministries, departments of central and state government, institutions like NDMA, NIDM, DRDO, etc., National Police Academy, universities, state and central police organizations, UN, WHO, and other multiple institutions. He is also running the largest stress management course for entire Tamil Nadu police of 1.25 lakh personnel, ITBP, and various other forces. Welcome, sir, and thank you so much for agreeing to speak on the webinar today and interact with our participants. Over to you, sir.
Thanks, Dolphy. Very good afternoon. Very good afternoon to all the participants there. Before I begin my presentation, let me thank the Executive Director of NIDM and Professor Santosh Kumar, and my good friend Raka is there, along with him Ranjan, and from CRI.
Thank you very much, Jay. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Most welcome.
Yeah. So, and Dolphy from CRI and other colleagues from CRI and other organizations. A very good afternoon. My earlier speaker almost covered most of the things. My topic here is that what is that actually that impacts children in disaster? How it affects, and what are the ways and means we can help them. So this is so some of the things which I would not like to duplicate what the earlier speaker spoke about. So I'll be more talking about from the very, very practical perspective, and I would like to take more questions from you on this aspect. So we all know actually that before my screen. Dolphy, can you see this PPT? My PPT?
Yes, sir, it's visible.
Thank you.
Yes.
So, the topic of this present disasters, psychosocial care during the disasters. You know, all of you must be aware that India is a theater of disasters. We are blessed with so many resources, so much of diversity, so much of colorfulness in our vibrant country, but we are also actually somewhere, endowed with a large amount of disasters, both human-made as well as a natural sort of a phenomenon, which actually keeps occurring. So every day, the news actually doesn't go without hearing any sort of some sort of a disasters occurring one or other parts of the country. And the recent one, all of us actually still, it reminds us is the COVID, because no one is untouched by this disaster. It was a global disaster, pandemic. So all of us somewhere directly or indirectly affected by this disaster. So what happens in a disaster? So what we were talking about in this session, disaster actually, of course, it actually is multidimensional event, which actually brings forth a large amount of stress and trauma in terms of loss of life, in terms of injuries, in terms of displacement, in terms of lifestyle struggles which comes after this disaster event, and the changed life situations really puts people under severe stress. And children are actually not exception, and they are also part of the society, the family, and from the community, and they are one of the most vulnerable among the population. So here we are talking about the vulnerable population. So what is that actually that it brings forth? Like I was talking about the disasters. Disasters brings about, there are 4 or 5 things actually specifically happens to the children. So before that, I would not like to go into the details of definition of children and definition of disasters. Just for the sake of understanding here, I would like to actually say that the WHO defines, because psychosocial care is part of an health paradigm. So anything, any disaster, any event which is actually ecological or psychological in nature, which actually goes beyond actually the coping capacity of the people, is called a disasters. So the coping capacity, when we don't have the capacity wherewithal to face that event or a situation, this is called actually disasters. Disaster, that's what they are talking about. So it is multidimensional. So it actually affects in every sphere of our life. So that is where actually that. So what happens to the children? So it happens, so many things actually happens in a disaster. For example, recently, what are some of the disasters which I would like to quote, which we are working on it? This is children are first and foremost is some of the things which you come across is actually there in the screen. In any disasters, these are all some of the news items which we come across. Stress and illness. There are actually certain psychological reactions, behavioral reactions, school avoidance behavior, struggle for basic facilities, torture, violence, exploitation. So these are all some of the things actually that which comes on the forefront after any disaster for the children as per se. So what happens in the recent, some of our experiences I would like to actually bring in before actually I move on to the impact on the children. So during our intervention in the 2018 Kerala floods, the mental health issues, the livelihood issues, school issues, lack of awareness, and social cognition, all these things are actually became very prominent. But at the end of the day, what exactly happened in Kerala when this sort of floods happens during the disaster? Of course, first and foremost is that the whole family is gone for a toss. Water comes and takes out everything. So the children are actually suddenly in the nowhere. So their familiarity, they loses their familiarity. So for any children, their house, their surroundings, the parents are actually the most secure sort of environment that is lost. So the environment is the security, safety is lost. So they are actually pushed into as uncertainty and insecure sort of an environment. So suddenly actually they were put into an Kalyana Mandap or relief shelter or somewhere. So that itself actually disturbs. So the equilibrium, the life of a child is actually that if you look at this, we all actually follow a certain pattern of lifestyle. But for children, it is much more important. A child is actually goes to school, sleeps on a time, eats on time, plays on time. Everything is scheduled, and disasters, everything actually gets disturbed. So that is actually there comes actually the second aspect. That is actually the stressful aspect. So the stress, the environment is lost, the safety is lost, the uncertainty comes, the routines is lost, and then disruption in their lives. So this is where actually some of the things actually that which came. I will keep talking about it. So these were actually very prominent in Kerala floods, and subsequently there was a 2019 also actually that floods happened in Karnataka. Scores of districts were affected, and one of the most affected were the children. And some of the most prominent reactions, psychological reactions or impact which we come across was aggressive behaviors, hostility, emotional distress actually due to these sort of experiences. Because any disaster experience is an unpleasant experience, which no one actually would like to see or witness or experience it. So that is where actually that here also actually that the psychological impact, behavioral impact, adjustment reactions, like they can't actually, they don't want to go to school. They do, I mean, they were actually struggling to actually adjust to a new place or something. So then the recent one, why I'm taking you this, I would like you to actually relate with what is happening in our country. Hopefully, God forbid, actually, that it should not happen in your location, in your place. But this is where actually happening in other parts of the country at present. The recent one was the Joshimat landslide in Uttarakhand. So the children were one of the most affected because that 4,500 families were suddenly pushed out of their home and they had to spend their day-to-day lives outside of their home or in the relief shelter. And absolutely, there was actually a disruption in many of the aspects of the child's life. So some of the things which we prominently actually noticed was most of the children in this Joshimat area were became quiet. Previously, they used to be very bubbling, jovial, going out and all these things. Loss of appetite and sleep was very prominent. So there is actually a biological change. Continuous sobbing actually also. People were scared that when their place will go down, it will be covered with the mud and slush, all those things. So this also actually there is a large amount of anxiety. And there is actually also cases of exploitation abuse. Although I would not like to comment on the official records on it, but they were actually also actually in a vulnerable position that few interested parties or some other people who are coming to exploit this vulnerable situation. And also school going, there was a marked decrease in the attendance, school attendance, and so on and so forth. So these were all some of the things actually we were noticing recently in India. And if you look at it globally, there is actually a very significant painful event happened during this time. Is a Turkey earthquake. We all know actually that what happened in Turkey and one of the most vulnerable were children. So the children's life has gone upside down, and finally, where it actually boils down is sense of security. So, like the previous my school speaker was talking about COVID, it also actually brought forth various sort of difficulties to the entire population, especially to the children. So suddenly, actually, that all these things actually went to online, like what I'm talking to you online. So they also went into this mode, and this itself is distressing, not like actually a very pleasant thing for the children. And so COVID took a maximum hit on the children. And why? Because the pandemic also actually is a disaster. And any disaster actually affects their vulnerable factor because they are on the developmental stage and their current education status and their special needs. And also some of the vulnerabilities also actually which came into prominence was that their pre-existing mental health conditions. And also because previously to these disasters or even in the pandemic, uh, there are many children had certain difficulties, not only on the scholastic front, also on the mental health front. So, and also the other socio-economic factors of being vulnerable also actually propel them into more vulnerability for higher sort of a stress. So the mental health spectrum, actually, if you look at it, actually, that children experiencing good mental health, children showing signs of mental health difficulties, children experiencing mental health disorders. So you will find actually that three different group of children in any disasters. Not every, as I said, no disaster actually, leaves anybody. It touches everyone. Only the degree varies. So there are actually children who can cope well. There are children who will struggle. There are children actually who may be confused. There are children actually who may be actually oscillating this side, that side. So there are actually, we find actually separate categories of children. So what exactly happens in a disaster? And disaster, if you look at it, some of the basic biological aspects actually takes a very major hit, like appetite and food and sleep and other biological functions, and also fatigue, the chronic fatigue and changes in the appetite, shortness of breath, headache, rigidity in terms of muscle and sleep disturbances. So all these things actually also very prominent. And also there is actually a large amount of cognitive difficulties also happens. Children may find it difficult to think because they may be confused what to do, how to go about it, because they are finding that parents are struggling and their environment is changed. Everybody is actually in utter confusion and everything is lost. And what would happen to our future? So all these things actually will make their decisions also actually very difficult, focusing on them. For example, in most of the disasters we have seen during the relief and post-rehabilitation times, the children's scholastic performance actually comes down because they are actually more focusing on the other aspects which happened during their time of disaster or subsequent to disasters. So this is also actually very major issues, and their problem solving ability actually takes a very major hit because unless otherwise a normal sort of days in a disasters, everything is actually going to be a problem, whether you are living, whether you are having your food, whether you are sleeping, whether you're going to school, or whether you're going to next day, how you're going to spend. So everything is actually going to be become very uncertain. So there is actually going to be a large amount of issues and lack of attention, poor judgment. All these things are some of the issues actually which I'm highlighting it. And also the third one is that the psychological feelings, the feeling of anxiety, panic will be very palpable and prominent, and stress and worries would be actually the hallmark of the children. Children may not express it like an adult, but it will be all actually bringing out through behavioral aspects. They may not actually eat, or they may overeat, or they may refuse eating, or they may show anger, they may show irritability, or they show indifference, or they may actually withdrawn. So all these things actually will be happening due to their psychological aspect, emotional aspects, feeling of hopelessness, worthlessness, helplessness. Most of the time, like many of the children who wanted to do medicine or an engineering, because of this floods, everything is wiped out. So suddenly, actually, that ambition became actually nil. Ambition is dead. So that actually takes a very major toll on a child, where the self-esteem, the confidence level, everything actually goes for this one. Again, that's actually going to be very, very debilitating for a child and his future with other activities also. So the frequent mood swings will be very, very prominent. I've seen actually many of the parents talking about that. He doesn't speak nowadays, or he gets very angry for even small things. Excessive anger, this is we have seen in COVID, because one why in COVID, I mean talking about it, because NIMANS is also actually nodal center for psychosocial care in disasters for the entire country. And also we are running the national helpline for COVID-19 in 13 languages. Added to that, we are also actually running India's first digital detox clinic. So we get a lot of people actually like excessive anger because my parent actually not giving this. So the social withdrawal, the feeling of loneliness, everything will be very, very prominent. And some of the studies actually not only in COVID, in other things, so disturbed sleep, nightmares, poor appetite, agitation, and attention. So these are all actually some of the very prominent things actually you will find it. See, we actually club actually these children into three major categories: 0 to 5, 6 to 11, and 12 to 18. So these categories, each category has its own reactions and way to handle, I mean, they deal in the disasters. Like 0 to 5 children, most commonly actually will not eat properly, or there will be actually a lot of crying, biological changes happening in that 0 to 5. Some amount of behavioral issues also, like irritability, crying, and all this. That 6 to 12 years, is the age where actually, because 0 to 5 age, children may not understand what is loss, what is death, what is grief, all those things. Only thing is that they may actually understand, observe what is actually happening to the parent. Parents are not actually in the same way as they used to be. But 6 to 12 years children, they will be in a position to understand about death, loss, injuries, displacement, and also the parents struggle, the environment change, and the life disruption which actually brought in their life. So all these things actually they are able to actually at least understand to major extent. And today's generation is actually very well accustomed to all those things. They are actually much more actually informed about all those things. So they are able to understand. So there will be a large amount of behavioral changes in these children, like what I was mentioning about it. And absolutely the grown 12 to 18 years, you will find actually a large amount of emotional impact happening around them. That the low self-esteem, the helplessness, uncertainty, anger, and also the high-risk behaviors. Many of these children, many have seen children started smoking, children started stealing. Children, a lot of truancy actually also behavior comes because the parental supervision goes during these disasters, because parents will be actually more focused on getting relief materials, or actually schools will be closed. It may not actually open for a long time, and maybe being in a relief shelter where everybody, maybe 15,000 people, 10,000 people may be living there. So these are all happened even what we saw in the Gujarat earthquake or tsunami in 2005. Subsequently, whatever the major disasters happened, we have seen these sort of comments were very prominently actually propping up. So the young children face these things, and school-going college children, which I already covered it. This is not actually important, but the only thing is that the attendance, it takes actually a large amount of scholastic hit because the disruption in there, this one, and that's what happened during the COVID also. And another aspect is that in any disasters, children with special needs actually are more vulnerable than the other children. And recently, the experiences of my experiences back in 2015 in Chennai earthquake and Kerala floods, then before that in Srinagar floods in 2013, and Karnataka floods and other floods. See, one thing very prominently which came out is that many a times these flood affected areas, the parents themselves, the family themselves, leaves their children at home to safeguard the family property and others, whereas they'll go into the relief camps. So there is actually a large amount of anxiety, panic among them. The one heart-wrenching experience which I had was in Chennai in 2015. There was a blind school. The water came into third floor, second floor or something. These children were traveling to the higher floors, blind children. So look at actually that the kind of trauma they will undergo, whether if they are blind, if hearing impaired. So the special children needs are actually very different from the normal sort of children, and the impact will be actually much larger because they're already in assistive device, they're already in assistive sort of a medication, they're already in assistive sort of a program, and added to that, these sort of things actually comes in. It's going to be actually a double disaster for them. So, and added to that, some of the things which I was talking about it, I can take some of the questions on it. During this COVID, definitely actually had a higher sort of an impact on the children because there is no contact with the peers, excessive use of social media, cyber, all these things actually were very prominent. And one thing is that the children, see, this is the age where you have to move. So the social distancing, the physical distancing, the restrictions, all this brought in actually no movement. So that actually again actually culminated in weight gain, loss of daily routines, unethical practices also in terms of academic or in terms of many other things. They were actually went into it, stealing and all these things. So these are actually some of the things we prominently saw during the COVID. I will not explain each and every one because it was already explained there. So all these things actually culminated in a higher sort of a distress. See, the one thing is before I go into this one, any disaster, distress, stress are actually part and parcel of life. But disasters are actually a little special, where actually that the impact is much more because it is multidimensional. And children are actually not prepared for it, or neither actually they expect for this, or not they know how to handle this. So that is where actually that it is all actually becomes much more actually problematic. So disaster always actually leads to distress. Distress lead to disaster leads to stress. Stress leads to distress. Distress leads to disorder, and disorder leads to disability. That is a mental disability. So these five things happens in any disaster for anybody who experiences witnesses a disaster. But only the degree varies. There comes the things. The children are actually, they may not be knowing many things, but they are also actually have their own innate strengths. So we don't actually pathologize, means actually that we don't look at only the weaknesses, we also look at their strengths. So it's a complex issue because children are actually biologically, physically, psychologically, socially, actually, they are in a vulnerable position than the adults. So it takes actually a special care to provide them psychosocial care in any disaster situation. So their expressions will be very different, mostly of behavioral aspects. So we need to actually have a good understanding about their reactions. And what I was talking about this one, in any disaster, so this is, we don't actually look at from an individual or a unilateral sort of a thing. The physical, cognitive, psychological, behavior, social, economic, everything is actually intertwined. If there is a change happens in one aspect, definitely actually it brings a change in your mental health aspect. That is actually a psychological aspect. So that's where actually that it is interconnected. So there we need to actually, if you want to provide any care to the children in any disasters, we need to look at them holistically. So that's where I was talking about it. So how to actually provide this care? See, providing psychosocial care in the disaster situation is very, very challenging. Many of you have seen only the COVID-19, but what happens in the flood areas? What happens in an earthquake? What happens in a tsunami? What happens in a bomb blast? So there actually that providing a psychosocial care is very challenging because it will not happen in the room. It is a community-based psychosocial care. So you can't actually have the luxury of doing what you do inside a hospital or a clinic. You can't do this. So you need to actually handle this in the community level, maybe under the tree or maybe in the relief shelter or maybe in the school or maybe in a Kalyana Mandap. So what are all the things, basic things actually you can do it? So first and foremost is actually that you have to do a rapid need assessment of the children. How are they actually living there? So, I mean, you need to observe. So I'm not going into that protocol because that's actually a different protocol. I mean, it takes large amount of time to teach those things, but just some of the things for a non-mental health professionals. So changes in appetite, physical symptoms. So you need to actually focus on this. This is, I'm not talking about, Dr. Avneet actually already covered what a parent should do to a child. But now I'm talking about it, what a person, a community level volunteer, or maybe an NGO functionary, or whoever it is, a teacher, or whoever is actually there in the vicinity of the disaster, or helping the disaster survivors and the community, should look into this aspect. The physical symptoms, so which I was talking about, changes in any basic biological functions like sleep, appetite, and their movements and their talking, all those things actually you need to do it. And sleep disturbance will be very, very predominant. And temper tantrums and anger outbursts. So this is also, I was talking about the angry, there's a behavior symptoms. And bedwetting, this may not be very prominent among the children, but it do happen till 6 years or 7 years. This is because we have seen actually this is happening because when you witness a disaster, which is actually overwhelms. And nightmares will be very, very prominent. So you need to talk to them, not only observe them about it. So one of my experiences that when I was working in Gujarat, I happened to handle a group of children in a relief shelter. The prominent complaint was that children are not sleeping. They are scared to sleep. They are very restless. Then we went and found out actually that why these children are not sleeping. We also thought actually that because of traumatic experience, loss of life in front of them, loss of injuries, large number of buildings are gone and all these things. But then we found that the relief shelter was pinched inside a burial ground. So for a child, actually, will be very, very traumatic, actually. So they were getting large amount of nightmares. So how also rebellious behavior. So rebellious, I mean, children will not listen because I told you that parents will control both because parents will be more focused on getting relief materials, getting the house, getting the compensation, all those things. So the rebellious behavior also actually one of the things which actually due to changed situations, it happens. Loss of interest in studies, of course, stays away from others. So some of the things actually that we predominantly we see in the children. And also their disappointment will be the common symptoms of psychology during the pandemics. Some of the things which we noticed during the pandemics is that they were actually frustrated, were angry, and for even small things. So some of the things actually that which they used to be involved, they were not able to actually enjoy those things. They stopped doing those things. So there is actually a large amount of disruption in their activities. So, and also family also actually played a very major role. Sorry, just a minute. Just call madam. So many of the social anomalies also actually brought forth during this COVID. Child marriage happened, and so all these things they had to cut down their studies. They have to go for the work. So these are all some of the issues which happen. So what happens in a long term actually during the disasters? School level also it takes an impact. House level also it takes an impact. Individual level also it takes an impact. Family level also it takes an impact. So all these things actually that it's not a very pleasant for a child actually that because what is that equilibrium got affected. So I think actually that kindly see these slides. I will not explain the slides. You can shoot me questions actually that on this. What happens to a child at school level in a disaster place? I'm not talking about a normal place. In a flood, earthquake, tsunami, bomb blast, because that is what actually that we are working on that. So what happens to these things? So absolutely the family breaks down. The structure of the family breaks down. See, what I saw in many of the disasters like tsunami, earthquake, and floods, even in COVID, many of the children's role changes happen because a child used to study at 11th standard, stopped studies and went for work. And suddenly the mother died. The elder sister, who is actually a 10th standard or something, became a caregiver. So there is actually a role change. This is actually going to be very distressing for a child. So this is what actually the long-term effect. And also the children during the quarantine also went through various sufferings, which I will not explain it. I'll take some questions, more interactive. I would like to actually do it. And what happens, the intervention in disasters. See, leave alone my slides. What is actually that disaster psychosocial care actually advocates? As I told you, it is very, very challenging to work in a disaster, work in a relief shelter, or work in an open field along with the children. So first and foremost is that the first psychosocial care intervention in any disaster during the disaster is that bringing their routines. So whether it is in terms of play or in terms of actually informal activities or whatever it is, there is going to be a large amount of group activities for them because that itself is actually a therapeutic for them. So we need to actually organize number of activities which is focused on bringing them together, where is actually giving them a platform to share their experiences, their traumatic experiences, the fear, apprehensions, and anxieties in that group through games or through some other modem like drama and others. So this is actually one of the first thing. Added to that, regularizing their other routines like sleep and food appetite. So this is a third thing actually that we have to do it. The fourth thing is actually that we have to encourage them to interact, go out of this one, because there is going to be a large amount of apprehension among the children that because of the new area or the threat is already there, the hazards, the risks which is there actually in the surrounding areas makes them actually to be aloof, withdrawn from their day-to-day social activities. So these are all some of the things actually that immediately anybody who works with the children in disasters in terms of in NGOs or volunteers or teachers or anybody actually who should actually focus on this. And added to that, one of the important thing actually that we need to do is reopening of their schools. So as soon as actually that we have to restart their routines. That is one is that school and play. So that is also actually one of the important aspects. So wherever we go, actually that we advocate to the state government to provide this one. So we train teachers also on that, on how to actually identify children's reactions and symptoms and how to provide care there or the psychosocial care. So here actually that I'm talking about sort of a community-based care, and where we have to also, this is predominantly of a group activity, and there will be also actually the individual activity comes like counseling or therapy, but these are all actually will not work in a disasters because the number of people you have to actually involve is too huge. For example, there were 179 relief shelters in Tsunami. I mean, almost 2 lakh population. In that, more than 40 to 50,000 children were housed. So you can't actually give one-to-one there, but there only actually that the protocol is that the psychosocial care protocol during the disasters is that identify these symptoms, distressing symptoms, whoever is actually having higher sort of symptoms, sort of a psychosocial care triage, that children who need higher sort of things will be called down and put to actually a professional for higher sort of a psychosocial care. Whereas mostly the larger population only requires psychosocial care activities through group or through activity model. So we actually encourage those things actually, and also identification of people with special needs or the higher sort of things, and give them actually referral and follow. So these are some of the protocols actually which we are working, and especially actually during the disasters, to work with the children, everything is through activity, whether in terms of drawing, whether in terms of sharing, or whether in terms of play modeling, whether in terms of writing, whether in terms of skit. So we have developed actually a protocol of 10 different activities through actually the mediums through we work to get this distress out. So the ventilation which we are talking about is for the adult will not work out here. So we need to actually do it through an activity. For example, a 7-year or 8-year-old child will not be able to speak to you, come and tell you. So one of my experience back in Sikkim earthquake, when I visited, there is actually a number of small children around 11 to 12 years, even 8 years, 9 years. They were monks. So what happened was when the earthquake happened in Chungtang area in the northern Sikkim, the local children were taken out by their parents who were in the vicinity of the place. But children who had come from far-flung areas like Arunachal Pradesh and other places, they were left to fend for themselves because the earthquake, the building damaged, so everybody ran out so for their own security. And around 20 children were actually stuck there. So they were all huddled and absolutely they were all in the fear. And they were all not talking actually when we visited them. So how to actually bring out this fear out of them? You can't actually just go and talk to 22 people. Then you need 22 people who are trained on these aspects. So that is where actually that you need to actually have a group sort of an activity. From there, whoever is actually not coming back to their normalcy, there you call out and send them for a referral. So that is a protocol of psychosocial triaging which we follow it. And long term also actually that we need to actually look at them holistically, like for the children with special needs or require higher sort of care. And so there is actually different protocol actually as there. So some of the things actually that the previous speaker also covered, so I will not repeat it again and again. So all these things are actually already repeated. I think I mean I would like to actually take some more questions from the participants. So how to manage and coping with stress? So avoid scheduling, over scheduling. So what happens in the disasters is during the disasters, for example, I've seen some 10 different organizations who are working with the children coming and making the children to draw for ventilation. This happened in Tsunami. So after some time, the child actually refused to cooperate. And then he started demanding actually that if you give chocolate, then only I will draw. So that is not actually a psychosocial care. So that needs to be, we need to be actually very, very sensitive in handling these children at the field level and make a sleep priority and advocating the parents to be a role model. Because when they see day and night, parents are actually struggling, crying, wailing, restless, going out, then that actually also transforms to the these children. So that is where actually that we need to also not only focus on the child, but also the parent. And increasing exercise, the physical activity, which I was already talking about, all these things are very, very common sense only that. So yeah, so some of the things, engaging the system is actually the most important aspect in any disasters. So you can engage them whatever the way you can actually do it. For example, in Leh, it needs to be actually very, very localized. So in Leh, actually, that it is a sub-zero temperature when there was a flash flood happened. We can't actually go there and ask them to actually take them out and come, let's play out in the -20. So it needs to be actually culturally contextual, also local situation also. Whereas actually there in Tsunami, it was actually a seashore. You can actually have a larger area to go out and play. So it's about, you need to be sensitive. The person who is actually working with this sort of children, that sort of disasters, so should know actually these protocols. And this was already covered. So some of three important aspects is that listening to them, comforting them, and reassuring them. So LCR is actually the buzzword for working with the children. And this is where actually that we don't actually listen to them, even their apprehensions fears. So all these things actually the previous speaker also spoke about it. Talk to the children, allow them to ventilate, listen to their statement, even if it is very negative, even if it is irritating. So please actually listen to them. Watch for their non-verbal cues, because in disasters, mostly children will actually throw you actually the non-verbal cues through behaviors and other aspects. So this is what strategies to address mental health issues is that we need to be very honest first and foremost, actually, that what we can actually do, what we cannot do. We can't actually that, for example, in Uttarakhand, there was a flash flood, this Uttarakhand Fest 2013, when there was a village actually that 53 fathers did not come back. 53 of the fathers, men perished. So many of the people who are working with these children, they used to say that your father is gone with Bhagavan, he will come, he will come. So that is not actually the way actually to do it. So no false promises, you have to be honest, but breaking the news, bad news is actually also very important, but you need to actually prepare the child through parent, through others to actually break this bad news. So it can't be actually just like that. And you can't also actually handle the stress like what they happened in Uttarakhand. So explaining what is happening in a way that can understand. Parents need to support. So we need to actually prepare the parents in managing their own stress, helping child to find ways to express themselves in a creative. So this I already covered it. And also one of the important aspect which happens in most of the disasters is that this child protection is an important aspect. Because as I told you that there's going to be a large amount of exploitation. So children who have lost their parents, there are actually people who wants to adopt. There are organizations who want to actually, or in the name of adopting, may want to take out. See, one of my experience was there during the disasters in Gujarat. So many, almost scores of children lost their parents. There was an NGO which wanted to take these children to Calicut, Kerala, for actually rehabilitation. If I ask you whether it is a good one or bad one, I don't know what would be your answer. Most of you would say that not good. Yes, it is not good because although actually on a humanitarian basis, they want to take the child out of Kutch to Calicut, but you see actually the environmental, the linguistics, the culture, the language change, which actually brings for the child who is already under trauma, and what would happen if a Gujarati Kutch child goes to Calicut, learning Malayalam, eating Malayali food, and in that new environment, there is no desert, there is no things which he used to adapted to. So this is all actually a double disaster. So that's where actually that child protection actually comes, not only in terms of child sex abuse, it also actually in terms of various other rights actually that. And rights is also one of the important aspects. Child rights is an issue that needs to be actually also that. And finally, why I'm talking about psychosocial care for all these things? Because psychosocial care is actually just not about providing psychological support, even being with them, listening to them, getting their resources in terms of education resources, or getting a compensation for their families, or making resources for them to play or activities. So this is not actually psychosocial care. Even protecting them not to actually to be displaced, protecting against actually any child right abuses, violations. This is what. So it is actually a holistic sort of care is called psychosocial care. So this is all actually under one umbrella. So we need to actually keep that umbrella to protect these children from various hazard, risk, vulnerabilities of during disaster and post disasters. So that's what actually that both international protocol and the national protocol also actually talks about it, of caring enough and safe environment, creating a caring environment for the children. So some of the things which is already actually covered it, which I will not go into the details. So with this, actually, I'll stop it. I would like to take some questions from the participants. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir, for your session, and thank you for linking it with other services, humanitarian services for children in the disaster situation. And now we will take the questions. Is Dr. Avneet also available for questions?
Yes, Dolphy, I'm here.
Okay, so I will state the questions one by one, and we can take them as we go. Sir, can you stop the sharing of PPT?
Yeah.
Okay, so just a moment. Yes. So there is a question by Dr. Kalyani. She asks, how can we bridge the gap between stress levels of parents and children?
This for whom? Me
Sir,
or?
it is not stated. You can mutually decide who wants to take the question.
Dr. Avneet, would you like to take this question?
I want to know more what she's trying to ask. What do you mean by bridging the gap? Is it that how together they can work on it? Dr. Kalyani, if you can just elaborate your question a little.
Okay, meanwhile, we can go on to another question. Just a moment. Yes, there's one more question which says, how long does it take for children to recover from trauma? Hello,
Yes.
has the question been?
Okay,
Yes.
okay. I think I can go with this one. It depends. If it is not addressed, trauma and experiences of trauma, flashbacks of trauma, any childhood, incidences which have happened can have flashbacks throughout one's life if it is not addressed. But since we are talking in case of disasters, the normal grieving period is 6 months. If anything goes beyond that, then there has to be, one needs to refer the child to a specialist or an expert who will take care of the child if the child is showing symptoms. But since you are asking childhood traumas need to be addressed. The child needs to be healed out of it. Otherwise, flashbacks and PTSD from the same keep on happening. I have seen cases in which, as adults, once you do experience sharing and once they try to open up, they talk about, having nightmares and having flashbacks of the incidences, and also a lot of anxieties and panic attacks also. There are cases which come up just because the person was not healed of those childhood traumas.
Okay, sir, would you like to add something to this?
In this, three things we need to bring in when we are talking about disaster mental health, actually, that the predisposed condition, the pre-disaster, what was the child status, and during the child, what is the amount of stress, which I was talking about, that five important aspect: loss of life, loss of injury, displacement, lifestyle struggles, all those things, which actually brings during the disasters. And the post-disaster, actually, that what is actually the struggles which actually brings in. So these three things also actually determines, along with the whatever Dr. Avneet was talking about it. So you can't determine a very time frame on it, because it differs from child to child, incident to incident, and the amount of trauma which has. So we need to actually look at from an holistic point of view, that what sort of support system which the child is actually coming, what sort of family actually that upbringing, the early childhood experiences, all these things are matter. It is a very, very time-taking process, and of course the PTSD is a very, very palpable for these sort of children, and it takes actually a larger actually effort in terms of intervention and care.
Thank you, sir. The next question is addressed to Dr. Jay Kumar. It says, "Dear sir, although the question may not fit the forum, but can you please help as to what are the treatments presently available for HIE and how parents can mentally be prepared to accept and move on?"
Yeah. Who is this?
Sir, this is from Manikandan Rajagopal, School of Business and Management.
See, HIE means what? I mean, it denotes actually many things. What is that he is actually talking about it?
So I have asked this question to them. They have not answered. So I was hoping that maybe you could. It says HIE. Anyway, we can move on to the next question, and meanwhile they may. It says they have answered. They say cerebral palsy, which causes global delay.
See, I'm not an expert on this aspect, and I think this forum is actually not for handling this. This is an IDD forum to be handled. Okay, so I think actually that he can actually contact us in a separate forum so that I can actually explain it.
Okay,
Let us actually keep it only for the disasters here, actually, the psychosocial care.
Okay.
Because that is actually coming under intellectual disability disorder, so that's we go into it.
Okay, thank you, sir. Okay, so this is with reference to the earlier question by Dr. Kalyani. She says she had asked the question that how can we bridge the gap between the stress levels of both parents and children, and she says that as both were equally affected, so I think she's trying to say that whatever Dr. Avneet had understood by the question, that is what she's trying to ask. So would you want to answer this?
Here, the bridging the gap is actually that, see, you can't bridge a gap between these two, because by generation wise, their biology wise, their understanding wise, the various makeup wise, they are two different people, children and parents. But of course, actually, they can be actually mutually supporting to each other in disaster. That's how actually that we do it. Because that is where actually we already covered that in our presentation, that we handle children not only alone, but we also involve the parent. First and foremost is what I was talking about, that role modeling of parent is very important in a disaster mental health, because the child get to see a father or mother mostly anxious, mostly restless, mostly talking very negative, mostly talking about uncertain futures, mostly talking about what to do, where to go, and the helplessness which they will show it in front of the child. And definitely, actually, that actually brings here also, transforms here. So that is where actually that brings this actually where we can actually bring in some amount of balance in this changed circumstances like disasters, because it is just not the child's life is changed, the parents' life, the family's life also changed. So that is where actually that we need to actually bring in certain common protocols for the parent and the child, that you should not speak all those things in front of a child. You can express it, but not in the way you are expressing it. Or I mean, you can cry, fine. You can't keep on crying actually. That somewhere actually that these things are actually also actually having a larger impact on that. So there is actually there are actually certain commonalities which needs to be agreed between the parent and the child. So there will be actually a separate session actually that we do it in relief camps or in during any disasters. For example, I'm talking about the Joshimat, this incident recent, because most of the time actually that this 4,500 families were standing outside in that sub-zero temperature along with the children. So many parents who identified this, they send the child to actually their relatives' house. But many children don't want to leave their parents. They were also standing. And in spite of all those things, actually, that they are seeing the parents were crying, arguing, irritable, frustrated, and all those things are fine. But at the end of the day, we call the parents. We had to tell them actually that, look, this is the situation. They're trying to actually solve this. They're trying to get some more solutions for it. So this, your understanding, your anxiety, your or the helplessness, all these things are actually, we do understand it, but certain things actually that kindly actually don't actually bring in front of your child. So assure them, reassure them that things will be all right. You can go to school, you can start your school things, you have to eat. Oh, by this actually that. So there are certain do's and don'ts actually that we advocate. This is what you can do it in the disaster area. We can't actually there sitting there actually and do counseling there for them. So there is actually group activities which we have done, do's and don'ts, providing a very basic psychosocial care protocols. That is what actually that brings immediately actually that some amount of balance on long term actually that. For example, there are actually parents who have lost their limbs, injuries, or one parent is not there, or a child, one sibling is lost. So there actually these are all special situations. So there also actually a large amount of issues comes, and there we handle them in a separate manner. So these are all takes time at the community level. It's not. I'm telling you, we are not handling this in the hospital, because in a disaster situation there is no department, no hospital, no everything is handled in the community, mostly by a very few mental health professionals, through non-mental health professionals, through volunteers, or through actually the NGOs. Right.
Thank you, sir. Moving on to the next questions, there are three questions with respect to schools and teachers. So I'm clubbing the three questions together. These are from Sneha Verma and Harjeet Pullar. They say that how are the schools and teachers being placed in this entire ecosystem of psychosocial care of children?
Sorry, it's for me or it's Dr. Navid can do
So
it?
you can mutually decide.
Because I mean,
Whoever wants to answer. So this
she's
is
also
basically
there.
with respect to schools and teachers. How are they, equipped to respond to psychosocial care response in post-disaster scenarios?
Okay, I'll handle it. See, from our experiences, most of the teachers are not equipped to handle this situation. I mean, I'm not faulting them because it is actually that they don't have that knowledge, awareness, skills to actually do it. For example, post-disaster, recent disaster in Karnataka floods, many of the children are not in the same way they used to focus on studies. They stopped coming to school, they started bunking the class, and there is a large amount of behavioral changes in them, irritability, fights, getting into quarrels and all. So children, the teachers were finding it difficult, and to some extent they understand actually that these children are behaving due to the changed situation at home, at the family front, and their community, village front. But they don't know how to handle this. So that is where actually that there needs to be a sensitization for the teachers on basically how to identify the reactions of the children post disasters due to these sort of things, and how to handle them with a very, very basic sort of skills like which we already spoke about, talking to them, reassuring them, ventilating them, and giving them more time and space. This is what actually important. The children, because teachers are already under pressure, no, for the performance, for the results. So they may not wait actually that they push the child, so the child will not actually respond. So that is where actually that we need to actually train, sensitize. So wherever disaster happens, we do run a program for sensitizing the teachers on how to handle these children, how to identify, how to refer, follow up also actually if they are actually in need of higher sort of a care. Otherwise, most of the children can be very well handled with their level only. Only thing is that the skill is actually requires. So that's actually a different area altogether. And in COVID also actually we have run a number of programs of various state governments and the CBSE schools and other schools, state government schools, for teachers actually, that because teachers comes into stress because of this. Because at the end of the day, teachers also a caregiver. So how to handle the caregiver stress also important. So we do it actually on the two dimensional. One is actually how to handle the child stress and everything. And second is that how to handle their own stress, caregiver stress of handling these children. So that is how actually that we make the teachers to actually handle the children post disaster.
And I just want to add, Dolphy, if I am allowed.
Yes, please go
Yes,
ahead.
so a lot of trainings which I have also conducted and I've been part of in psychosocial care, I see a lot of teachers participating in them. Even there is a lot to be done, but it is still, it's not that they are largely ignored from this as a target group. They are made the target group in these training programs at the state and at the national level. But yes, they need to be involved a little more so that, the children do not suffer. So I think, yes, that is a good point that some policy matter needs to be made on this.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Though we don't have more time for questions, but there is one very interesting question. So I think we'll take that last one and wind up the session. Mr. Sunant Sampath asks, how can private companies be involved through CSR initiatives in this with respect to psychosocial interventions for children?
I think Sunant Sampath is actually one of my trainee, I feel, if I'm Sunant Sampath, the civil defense. Yes.
Yes, sir. They're saying they're agreeing to this.
Yeah. Yeah. Sunant, this is a question that how we can have CSR initiatives. Of course, in most of the disasters, which I am seeing right from the 2001 onwards, there are a number of big as well as small, middle level conglomerates coming and participating in various disaster rehabilitation, rescue, relief activities. So it is actually already part of various CSR activities for many of the organizations. Of course, recently in COVID-19, many organizations came forward in doing this online psychosocial care for various segments. Even there is an organization which came from ministry to us actually for only handling the housewives, and it went into all over India actually. So there are actually already there. The point here is that what kind of technological intervention is required apart from what is existing? How can private companies involve in CSR activities? See, only thing is that you need to integrate the psychosocial component into your CSR policy and plans and programs. That's what the first thing to happen. Second is that technological interventions. Today we are mostly a blended sort of programs. Only we do it online and offline sort of a thing. And whatever technological things we have to leverage and seek it. See, for one example is I'm talking about it. Wherever we go, the technology actually brings us more help, because through SMS we can actually impart a large amount of awareness to many of the people. Today, everybody is having a mobile phone, so not to panic. What to do, eat. I mean, how to. There, even if you share the do's and don'ts in mobile phone, that will actually, suit the minds of people, especially the children. For example, the rumors will rule any disaster areas. Rumors. So, how to actually handle this rumor is technology. So CSR actually can actually do it very well. Even sitting in your own office, CSR can actually, you will not go into the ground. Disaster, you will not hit the ground to do psychosocial activities in disasters nowadays, like previous years. So you can do it very well through your phone only. I think you are the one who is already doing it, Sundar. So hope actually that you will continue it. Nice to see you here, Sundar.
Dr. Abhi, do you want to add to this?
Actually, I'm not the right person to comment on it. I'm like a very grassroots worker. I'm a doctor, so I will not be, very confident answering this question. Somebody from a national institute or an institute as good as NIMHANS, I think sir has done justice to the question.
Thank you so much. And now I think that brings us to the end of our question answer round. May I now please invite Dr. Balu from CCDRR to deliver the closing remarks. Dr. Balu, over to you.
Thank you, ma'am. Very good evening to the panelists and all the participants. It's my immense pleasure at this platform. Without taking much time, just I would like to share two of my experience and also like to give a couple of recommendations to this platform. Just before COVID-19, myself and Dr. Rakasari both have been conducted research on 15 years of challenges and issues and success of children orphaned by tsunami. And the study was conducted in the tsunami affected districts of Tamil Nadu. Just we both were interviewing one girl just when we were asking about what happened on the day of tsunami. After even 15 years of the situation, after listening to the question, the girl just simply started crying. So this shows that how the disaster impact on the mental health of children prevailing in the life cycle of a child. So, and the another experience that recently we have conducted a research study on effectiveness of social security measures for COVID orphan children. And we have been interacted with COVID orphan children in 6 southern states. Majority of the children, they were said that they have received the counseling services from the various sources through like government and relatives and their friends also. And they also agreed that still there is a need of almost 1/3 of the children, they were agreed that still there is a need of counseling for them. So these are the two important experiences I thought of just sharing with you. In addition to that, I think during the disasters, as these panelists were discussed, the children were facing a lot of mental health issues. So I would like to give a policy recommendation that the counselors should be appointed in the relief centers where we are keeping the children during the disasters. And the second one is we also need to accelerate the research in the field of disaster impact on mental health of the children. So with these few points, I would like to thank the forum and all the panelists and the participants for giving this opportunity. Over to you, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Balu. And may I now please wind up the session by inviting Ms. Nitika from Mahatma Gandhi State Institute of Public Administration, Chandigarh, to give the final vote of thanks. Over to you, Nitika.
Thank you, Ms. Dolphy. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's my privilege to propose vote of thanks on behalf of MAXEPA, NIDM and CRY family on the successful completion of this webinar titled Psychosocial Care for Children During Disasters. Firstly, our heartfelt thanks to our esteemed speakers, Dr. Avneet Randhawa, MD, Community Medicine, Government of Punjab, and Dr. Jaya Kumar, Associate Professor, Newmans, who have shared their insights on psychosocial care for children during disasters. Our special thanks to our Director General, Shri Anirudh Tiwari, IAS, Shri Ganesh Dalan, IAS Director, MAXEPA, and Shri Rajendra Ratnu, IAS, Executive Director, NADM, for guidance and encouragement in our efforts during and for the webinar. We would like to extend our thanks to Professor Santosh Kumar, Project Director, CCDRR, NADM, and Mr. Sabhendu Bhattacharya ji, Director CRY, for the motivation and the moral support. My sincere thanks to Dr. Kumar Raka, Senior Program Officer, CCDRR and NADM, Dr. Balu, Consultant, CCDRR, and Shri Shaheen Ansari, Education Specialist, CRY, for sharing their thoughts on the subject on the platform. Kudos to Mr. Ranjan Kumar, Consultant, CCDRR, and Ms. Dolphy, Consultant, CRY, for the successful completion and coordination of this webinar. And last but not the least, our most sincere thanks to our most valued participants who joined us online for their active participation during the webinar, and the entire team of CCDRR, NADM, CRY, and MGCPA who have worked to conduct this webinar. We thank you for being with us during the webinar. We are grateful to all of you. It has been a great pleasure. Thank you all and a good evening. Over to you, Dolphy.
Thank you so much. And may I please now take your leave and end the session, and hopefully we can conduct more of these sessions and we can have more engagement with both our speakers in the future as well. Thank you so much to both of you, and thank you for a wonderful session. We can see in the chat box that a lot of the participants have been appreciating both the speakers today. So thank you so much and have a very good evening.
Thank you, Dolphy. Thank you.
Thank you. Good one.
Thank you.
Good.
And Nadia, you may end the